I've talked about the need to keep running experiments on yourself until you feel better in another video. But you may be asking, how can I work on myself when I feel truly terrible? The answer is that you can't, and that's okay. When you're in the darker moments of depression, for example in a deep brain fog where everything feels wrong, you may not be able to think at all. Or you may be locked in a pattern of recurring thoughts that you can't really control or escape from. Attempting to work on yourself at the worst of times is actually counterproductive. You don't need to compound a poor state of being with feelings of guilt, a lack of progress on top of that poor state. When deep depression happens, as much as you may not want to, I think the best thing is to try to find a way to accept that it's okay to be broken for now. The best strategy I came up with for those moments is to try not to think about anything important at all, and certainly not to make any decisions. Keep reminding yourself regularly that what you're thinking and feeling isn't real, it doesn't actually reflect reality or your situation truthfully. Concentrate on a diet of bland distractions. Uplifting Disney films might be good, or if you're me, well, I like watching reruns of Star Trek. If you can think partially, use your energy to employ a technique like thought stopping, or if you're on the fence somewhere between functioning and not, see if you're able to meditate. I'll talk about both of those in other videos at some point. Though the annoying thing about meditation is that you actually have to be in quite a good state to be able to do it. But sometimes you can do it if you're just on the border. The reality though is that these poor states do not last forever. Depending on where you're at, you may find that there are times of day when you're better functioning, or you may get some good days interspersed with bad ones, or entire longer periods with a better level of functioning. I haven't yet met anyone who doesn't have at least some periods where those things are a bit better, though I do know that it does vary greatly from person to person in terms of how long that happens and how often it happens. Whatever shape those times take for you, what's absolutely critical is to use them to make progress. These are the moments to be proactive. These are the times to try a new experiment, to talk to your doctor, to read on the subject, to make a change in your life, to speak to some supportive friends, or perhaps to create an advanced statement to guide those around you on how they can best support you during your next episode. I invite you to consider really using these moments. They may be all you have, but if you choose to use them to explore ways to make yourself better, then gradually you can see those good moments expand. They may become more and more frequent as you get better, and eventually they might even start to blur together so you have fewer and fewer bad moments. If you don't make use of these times, it will really slow down your recovery. Fit the thinking and planning into the good moments and keep trying over and over until you make progress. I don't believe that anyone is to blame for being depressed. No one would choose this state if given that choice. You can't control your biology, the thinking patterns that you learned as a child, or some difficult relationship. However, something that I did find empowering is to take responsibility for it. Now, I don't want you to misinterpret what that means. Remember that responsibility is not the same as blame. Think about that word responsibility and break it down. It's actually made up of two words, response and ability. It is your ability to choose your response to whatever happens to you, to choose how you respond to your depressed state or to your circumstances or to the events around you. Now that may sound daunting, particularly if your condition is totally overwhelming, so you may not be ready for this yet. And I know that different people watching this video may well be in different places. If that's the case, that's okay. Think about this as a challenge to perhaps work up to in the future. As I grew in my understanding of this condition, I eventually realized that I could choose to be 100% responsible for it, not to blame for it. I didn't wish it on myself, it started happening when I was 15, but responsible, able to choose my response to the condition. Now, being responsible doesn't magically make it better and it doesn't wish it away. It's not about some false bravado where you're in the deep throes of a depressive episode and you're responsible and so you're somehow okay. That's not true at all. At those times, you're not responsible. There's no point trying to be responsible if you're suffering from a brain fog so thick that you can't think, or if you're in a psychotic state in hospital. If you're deeply depressed, it's pretty much impossible to choose your response because your brain doesn't work. But what you can do is increasingly choose to be more and more responsible when you come out of those states. You can develop a sense of responsibility which comes back in those gaps, in those better moments when you're functioning better, those periods between episodes. And at that moment you can choose to respond to what has just happened and to take ownership, and then try to find some new way to make progress. This is so important because the risk is that depression can be so powerful and so overwhelming that you feel completely powerless. The risk is also that those short times where you are better are such a relief that all you want to do in those moments is to try to squeeze in as much life as you possibly can and not spend your time thinking about your condition. I remember thinking, this whole thing is having such a massive impact on my life, so why would I want to let it also take time and energy when I'm actually feeling better today? Yet your ability to take action is better in those moments. And so whilst I agree that enjoying life in those times is very, very important, you can also use those moments to make choices, to choose new experiments, to find ways to make those moments a more permanent state. As I better understood what was happening, I learned to wait for a better state so that I could make those decisions, and I eventually got better at using that time to make good ones. And they started to mean that I got better, and then I had more and more of those states. Another thing that might be daunting and might be putting you off taking action is that there are better and worse responses, or you may not know what choices to make, or you may be afraid that you're going to get it wrong. Remember though, taking responsibility doesn't mean that you should try to do everything by yourself. It's responsible to reach out and seek help, to work with your doctor, to work out what's happening to you, to make a positive change in your life, to seek answers or to seek a new form of support. Remember that every decision that you do make to go in a certain direction does give you something. You do learn from making those decisions. And of course I will share as many ideas as I possibly can on this channel to give you as much food for thought as I can. Now, I'm not saying it's easy, but no matter how powerless you feel, you're not completely powerless. You do have power. No matter how overwhelming or how trapped you may feel, somewhere it is there within. It may come and go, but it is there. So rather than thinking that life happened to you or your condition happened to you, can you start to think of ways that you can start happening to it? You can start happening to your condition. It takes some time, but I do believe that you can get there. I went from a state many years ago where I could end up on bad days spending the better part of a day rocking in a chair to eventually taking ownership of my whole condition, including that state itself. Now, that was a critical piece in letting me crack it, as I developed my own ownership in response to my own depressive episodes. I also then got to the point where I started to think of it as this separate thing that was mine and I was responsible for, but it was also public enemy number one. And at times it was my top or my only priority, and I viewed it as a battle with this dysfunction within. And stepping back like that also helped me to have strength. That viewpoint may or may not work for you, but it's a thought that was certainly helpful for me. So in summary, taking responsibility for getting out of the situation that I was in was one of the most empowering things I did. I invite you to think about whether you could get to that place, a place where you both accept your condition and choose to be fully responsible for it. It sounds like a paradox, but in my experience it works. You could choose to be responsible for working on your next steps in those moments when you're functioning better, while accepting that you can't be responsible when you're unwell. And please remember, you're not to blame. I truly mean that. No matter how you got here, I don't believe that anyone chooses depression. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.